right, guys. Welcome to Beard of Darkness Book Reviews. I am so happy that I've finally we've sent a bunch of emails back and forth, but I finally get to talk to the man, Adrian Collins from Grimdark magazine. How are you?
Really well, thank you. It's really nice to meet you in person, Matt.
Yes, as absolutely, very nice to meet you as well. One of the first things I remember, uh, I found fantasy. I found that I really enjoyed grimdark fantasy or dark fantasy. I love all sorts of fantasy, but I was doing a lot of research, and I found your website and the people on your team in this website, and I've had quite a few of them on. And man, it's just really inspiring what you're doing, and I'm just glad to be here with you. And I would love to start this off with maybe telling us how it starts, what you do, and like a mission statement. What did you want to do with this website?
Right. So, Grimdark magazine, essentially, we want to be the place that people go to when they want to read dark fiction, find out about dark fiction, get book recommendations, see conversations with authors, all the way from the big name authors like Brandon Sanderson that we were fortunate enough to interview last year, through to authors who perhaps can leverage our platform to reach more readers if their own platform is a bit smaller and their readership is a bit small. So essentially we want to be the place to go to when somebody thinks I'd like to read something dark. They think Grimdark magazine.
I think that you've really filled that spot. I don't know anyone. I mean, I love Fanfi Addict. I write for them, and I really enjoy that whole team. So you kind of both of those websites, yours and David's, do wonderful things. But I would absolutely say that yours was the founding one for me. It was foundational for me in my journey. One of the biggest reasons I'm here, and one of the reasons that I found myself so deep in love in this passion to not only read, but talk to the people behind the page, if you will, the people who put that pen to page or the keyboard to page or whatever you want to say. But giving also those interviews. Oh my gosh, Patrick Rothfuss. I mean, Beth and John did such a great job. I'm sure that was so cool to give them that platform to speak with such a guy.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think one of the things that Beth in particular over the years has done for interviews, if you look back at the interviews from years and years ago, because we've been around for, I think, nearly 10 years now. When you look back years and years, they are quite formulaic. You'll see repeated questions from interview to interview that create like a core, and then you'll have a few sort of, I feel probably more surface level engaging questions. And then you look at that, and then pretty much the year Beth Tabler joins, you look at the level of depth and research she goes into for her interviews. She completely changed the way that we go about interviewing at Grimdark magazine, and massive hats off to her for the things she's achieved. And I think for her, if I remember correctly, and I apologize, Beth, if I don't, but it was Rothfuss, Sanderson, and one other that she wanted to video interview, and they were like her major goals. So she's in 2022 and 2023, she ticked off 3 of the major video interviews that she's been aiming for years. So I'm so glad she's a part of our team, because I think that while GDM provides a platform, Beth has provided the quality, she increased the bar for the expectation of quality of our interviews with her obsession in providing engaging interviews. And you can see from the conversations that we've managed to have across the years since she joined, like Pat only allocated 30 minutes to talk with us, and that interview went for 3 hours because of Beth and because of John. And I can see Beth's just putting up a comment there that it was Butcher. Yeah, sorry, Beth, I had forgotten the third one there. We'll get him eventually. But yeah, look, it's I think that Beth and now John and our team have just leveled up with interviews. I'm actually really proud of the depth that they go into.
I look to Beth and John as well, and your website as a whole, as kind of, well, inspiration. And then what you're saying about how Beth does her interviews, you're right. One of the things I do lots of chats, and I'm going to do things a little different in the new year. Um, I don't know as far as exactly what I'm going to be doing different, but I hope to spotlight certain authors, or whether it's a booktuber I'm talking to, or a guy such as yourself that does like a magazine, in different ways. But I think Beth has really shown me, excuse me, the level of depth, like you said, that you can get to. And I think that's really important, because I have some questions for every author that are the same, because I think that they build that core, which is how you put it, and I really like that. But it's that research and that little bit of difference, or a little bit of tailoring those questions to the individual you have in front of you, that makes it really special. So I think she's doing a great job at that. So what was your inspiration behind, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start this magazine? What really put it in there, as far as you making that decision?
It came from a place of I, like so many people who start these things, I was trying to be a writer, and I punched out a couple of self-published books that I think weren't very good. They were fun and I loved them, but they weren't a great reader experience, I imagine. And then, I loved writing short stories, but I couldn't get them put in a place. And at the time, I probably had convinced myself that the problem was the market wasn't there for my short stories, versus my short stories probably just weren't fantastic at the time. So essentially what I did was I sat down with a mate one day who was kicking off a business to help people design their businesses as a consultancy. And he asked if he could use my ideas that I've been talking to him about from a magazine or a publishing perspective as a practice run for his new approach to consulting around helping small businesses map out what a business would be. So over a 6-pack of beer and maybe 4 or 5 hours in his study with a whiteboard, Grimdark magazine was born.
That's very, so there's a couple things there. I think that was just a good time to have this guy in your life, your buddy, and use the idea of what he's trying to get into to help kind of blast this off. And I think that was a wonderful idea. And what I also wanted to say is, one thing by talking to writers, whether they've published something or not, there's those stepping stones. Are you still writing today? Because I know these stepping stones are very, very important. I don't think any author's like, oh, the first thing I ever wrote is just blew me away. It was wonderful,
Yeah. No, I do it from time to time as a stress release. I actually find writing or just doing world building quite mentally relieving from, I do have a day job where I work Grimdark magazine. Outside of it, I do have a main day job that's very time consuming, very high pressure, and fun. I enjoy it, but it saps a lot of creativity away. And it's writing a short story and stuff is a great way to de-stress, but I don't submit them anywhere or show them to anyone. It's just something that I do because it's just part of my way of making sure I can function.
Sure. I like that. And I think it takes somebody brave and curious about themselves to find that, whether it's writing or listening to music or making music or drawing or painting, to find that, hey, this helps me mentally and I'm going to do this for fun. Not a lot of people make time for that, including myself. I have more recently, but before I started this channel and just talking to people for fun, I think we're like, okay, how can I make money? And we kind of skip over that we have to be good mentally. For our families, for ourselves, for our jobs, stuff like that, for our kids. So kudos for that, because I think a lot of people need to take more time to find that for them, what writing does for you. E.L. Montague, my Discord moderator and my writing buddy, the guy that I like to say that pokes me with the stick, that tells me to keep on writing. I'm doing my outline right now, and he's a big reason why. And he's also a fantastic writer. I don't know many that does dialogue much better than this guy, but he says, "Why Grimdark?"
I think I think a lot of this, my enjoyment of that kind of grim and dark sort of fantasy that you find your Mark Lawrence's, Joe Abercrombie's, Anna Smith Sparks sort of writing, my love of that actually I feel stems from history. So Dad was a history teacher, so when I was learning to read and I was, going from children's books into young adult books, there was a bookshelf and it had The Hobbit and then a stack of World War I and World War II modern history books. And so I actually spent the kind of the back end of primary school and a lot of high school reading history. And when you read that kind of history, you find, those fantasy stories where your general doesn't care about your people or is too stupid to understand how to do something properly, and everyone else just stands there and watches him cause the death of these 10,000 people who've walked into no man's land instead of run. Stuff like that is so rooted in how ridiculous we are as a species sometimes that, I actually relate one to the other quite a lot. And I feel that when you look at interviews with people like Peter McLean and those sorts of authors, that quite often they'll refer back to, quite often they'll read history as opposed to reading other fantasy books. And I'm not quoting Peter verbatim there. It's just the first name that came to mind. But I think that quite often, it just makes it so much more enjoyable when you look at how crazy some of our military history is and how unglorious and how stupid and wasteful and just incredibly cruel our military histories are. And then when you have a bunch of these stories which are built with generally those in the background as the greater overarching danger or evil or theme, I think that they link together really, really well. And I just enjoy reading them because I've been reading that kind of stuff, hooked in reality since I was probably 9 or 10.
I like that. I think I wrote this down for a little personal note for me to read more history based on your answer, because I think, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. I think so much fiction comes from that of which is very real, whether it's a feeling. One of my favorite things is to read those incredibly personal details that are very dark within somebody's soul because of this terrible event, whether it's violence or some other terrible things that can happen to a person. And when you go into the description of those emotions you would go through and just like the self-worth, and or the lack thereof, I really enjoy to read, because I think any human that's went through a traumatic event can relate with those. And that stems back to the real world. So I think what I took from your answer was to read more, because I love World War II history. And you're right, there's nothing shiny about that war. And happy and, unicorns and Skittles and all that fun stuff. And I think that can only help on the writing journey that I hope to be taking and publish something and that much. So thank you for kind of opening that up to me.
No worries. And I kind of feel like the, history that I read as a child, where, for example, when you look at, World War II, the Allies were pure good and the Germans collectively, to a human, were pure evil, right? And then when you go to, say, the Reparations Museum in Berlin, if I remember correctly, you go in there and you can see the sheer fear that the Gestapo caused the local population. So, they would have their own neighbors and whatnot dob each other in. And basically, a Gestapo officer would show up with a folio and your neighbors would be gone. And so naturally, people being, sometimes greedy would then go, okay, the guy who owns the competing shoe shop across the road, if I could get rid of him and take his customers. And so all of a sudden, when you go through the Reparations Museum, you can see that they started out with folios of detail and information on somebody that they would take away as a political dissenter or enemy of the state. And they finished with something the size of a postcard. And there's just this wall where all these postcards are just pinned up. And so you can see that, on both sides, there are always good, always bad humans. And it's just the nature of who we are as a species. And I think that, grimdark authors or really dark fantasy authors who may not want to be called grimdark will tend to like highlighting those people. So they like to say, we want to highlight the people that aren't potentially not the best humans, but are painted as glorious. Maybe they're the glorious hero, but they're incredibly arrogant and they don't care about their men and how many of their soldiers die. Maybe they are. I keep knocking this thing. Sorry. Maybe they are, a big barbarian who just wants to live in peace, but somehow always finds himself in the middle of the violence. I think there's that dichotomy of personality, which this type of fiction focuses on, that I really enjoy, which is that, we are all a bit good, a bit evil in someone else's perspective. And it's just kind of, the focus on that is what I really enjoy.
I can't remember. I was just interviewing somebody about a book that I really want to read that really highlighted what you said. Philip Chase. I haven't read the Dan trilogy yet, but from what I understand, there's priests and then there's these other people, and so it highlights that there's good and evil about priests, and there's good and evil about these bad people in our perspective. So I think that idea and topic is something that I hope to explore more in the coming years and the coming months. So I'm really excited about that because I think it's really important. So what do you highlight in your editions of your magazine as far as the content in them, and how frequently do you put them out?
So we put out quarterly magazine editions, and we do print projects from time to time. They're a huge effort to put out a print project. So we generally, it's one every couple of years. But when we do pitch emails to authors to ask them to participate in one of our magazines or our anthologies, we essentially say to them that we want a grim story told in a dark world by a morally grey protagonist. And we often say to them, hey, if you want to do an established world, we'd love to hear about one of your antagonists, or we love a story from one of the enemy's perspectives, or something like that, because I think those are fun stories as kind of tie-in stories. But generally, that's what we're looking for when we want to put that in there. We've always tried to be as diverse as possible. I think it's important to say, we do encourage participation by at first we were primarily focused on getting women in fantasy into the magazines, and then as the years progressed, we've tried to focus on the LGBTQII plus, the people of color. We've tried to really, get some people from Asia and Southeast Asia who are quite underrepresented in fantasy fiction from out this side of the world. And I think that with Beth in running the quarterly e-zines, she's really brought that extra level of focus and a much larger network than I ever had doing that, which is definitely shown in the reaction in readers to our magazine issues. You can actually quite funnily see at the exact issue where Beth took over, there's about a half a point jump in Goodreads consistently after. So I think giving her the lead on that has been a good decision. And then I also think a bunch of kudos needs to go to the team, and probably Fabian Schweizer as well, who's been a champion of diversity at GDM. So I think that they all put in a really big lens on making sure we get as broad a range of voices onto our website, into our magazine, and into our anthologies.
So that is wonderful. I remember that point coming up when I had Beth on the channel, and I think that is something that was already really important to her as a person. The diversity, representing people of all color and all creeds. And I think that's a wonderful thing to incorporate into something as grand as Grimdark magazine. So another look at Beth, man. She's just counting up the points, just tallying them up. I love that. Ryan Skeffington, he's a wonderful indie author, has a good question. Is there any restrictions with the term grimdark? Do you have enough variety of story under that umbrella?
So if you, from the perspective, if I can answer this from two perspectives, if we look at it, are there any restrictions like stuff we don't want? I think that when Grimdark came out as a big four marketing term for a very small period of time, there were a bunch of people trying to jump on the more violent and sexual violence side of it, and they were using that as a vehicle to to basically put out some stories which I think are pretty horrible and unnecessary. So those are the kinds of things that we've relatively consistently tried to avoid, and tried to make sure aren't a part of what we put out in our magazine. So is there a restriction in terms of what we can buy? Well, because we're a niche operation, we try to remain within that, I guess, our channel. So yeah, definitely, we've seen some amazing high fantasy stories come through, some awesome space opera stories come through. And in the end, when Beth and I look at the stories, we sit down and we go, okay, is this a grim story in a dark world told by a morally grey protagonist? And if it's not, then it doesn't matter if it's the world's best high fantasy story, we have to pass on it, because for a magazine or an operation like ours, branding is really, really key. Mm-hmm. If we start stretching out and doing high fantasy and stuff like that, you can go to tor.com for that, and they'll probably do it on a bigger scale and better than we can. So, we really try to focus on our niche, and yes, that does restrict the stuff we purchase.
That makes total sense. And he actually asked that in a way that answered one of my personal questions. I like that, though, because like you said, high fantasy stuff like that, you can go to Tor, and that's kind of what their thing is. It's a little bit of everything, and yours is a niche magazine. And I think that I used to think that niche meant limiting yourself, when really that is the absolute opposite of what I have come to learn. I think there are so many people interested in every little niche about fantasy and many other things that it really just makes it more quality than anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the broader spectrum you are, the harder it is for people to find what they want. And again, if you're a Tor.com, they're known for certain things. They're known for their diversity approach. They're known for their novellas. They're known for the short stories and novellas that they put for free on their website, which are by ridiculous authors that I'm sure cost them a bomb to put that story up there. But for us, going back to our mission statement, we want people who are really interested in the dark stuff to think of us first.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Speaking of grimdark, my guy, John Palladino, author of Trials of Ashmount and Buzzard's Bowl. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to plug my stupid phone in. I've done this before. Anyway, you'll still be able to hear me. Oh, I'm a rookie. Right. But yeah, the first grimdark book of my 2023 5-star read was John Palladino, man. Have you read Trials of Ashmount, Adrian?
I haven't. So I only managed to find time to read maybe 10 books a year since starting GDM. So I have to admit, I generally stick to the authors that I'm relatively already obsessed in. So I rely heavily on our review team to sort of have the, take on the broad spectrum. I'm pretty sure we've reviewed a couple of John's books before, and I remember the reviews being quite positive.
Yeah, he is a pantser, something that is not me. Again, guys, I'm so sorry that my camera I plugged it in. I'll be back on in just a second.
Mate, if it makes you feel any better, I once interviewed Michael R. Fletcher for an hour and forgot to record his voice. So
Oh my goodness.
It was an hour of me nodding and then asking a question every now and then.
So yeah, I've had this happen before, but gosh, you'd think I'd learned by now. I remember the first time it happened. I think it may have been with Anna Smith Spark. Yeah, I think it was, man, and she was so cool during it. But anywho, by the way,
wonderful human.
She is. Yeah, I mean, that's somebody who I know you and I very much agree. She has one of the most unique and honest and beautifully horrendous and disturbing prose. And I thoroughly enjoy every word she writes down, man.
Me too.
Yeah, like, I was talking, I don't remember who I was speaking with, but it's like, I don't know if I could point out anybody's prose, like if I just went in blind. And my wife was like, oh, no, you absolutely could with Anna Smith Spark. And she was right. Like, if I'm reading just blind and I see her writing, I could totally pick her out of a bunch. While this is about to pop back up, would you talk us a little about your amazing team at Grimdark Magazine?
Oh, mate, I am so bloody lucky with the team that we have at GDM. To really point out about the team is that they are all volunteers. So GDM is run on a shoestring budget. Pretty much every cent that comes in from affiliate linking, magazine sales, all that sort of stuff goes straight back into paying for a high performance website. It goes into paying authors, paying editors, paying artists, paying designers. So the team that we have are a phenomenal and very generous group of human beings who do this absolutely for the love of it. The leadership team, so Fabienne, Carrie, Beth, James, and including Aaron now, and John Morrow's just been brought up into the leadership team as well. They all sink an unbelievable amount of hours into building the thing that we've built and to putting out the stuff that we've put out. Our review team, they, again, in straight up, swap of advanced reader copies that they love to read in exchange for their reviews. Again, they put in plenty of hours to write excellent reviews and to make sure that the SEO on them is as good as we can get it. So we create opportunities for the authors whose books we review to have to be purchased and to be read about. Yeah. So yeah, look, mate. To be blunt, past and present, we've had probably over 10 years. We've probably had like maybe 40 to 50 team members over the years, and to a person, I am so thankful that they jumped on board with GDM and were a part of what we've built.
Yeah, I always tell. One second. I always tell John he has to spread some of that talent to everybody else. I mean, this guy is winning awards for some of the, like, as an engineer, the Glass Awards. Just he is full of not only wisdom but just inspires me on so many levels, man. And I had a good idea of who he was as like a reviewer before chatting with him on the channel, but then after talking with him, just all the stuff that he's doing, all the books that he reads, and his daughter as well, and all these people that he recommended that I reach out to and talk with, Esme Rosalind being one, which is a wonderful reviewer. So I'm also thankful for John and what he's kind of shown me. So it'd be so cool to have him a part of a team like yours. And you really I can see you're really thankful for the people who work for GDM.
Oh, massively. GDM in its current state does not exist without all of those people. Not even remotely close. Like, if you look back at the website that I built, and I'm laughing because it was terrible. The website that I built for the first GDM, was an absolute absolute nightmare to run. It was terrible performance. We've now got we've now got Alexis, who's been running it for the last few years and is responsible for how amazing it looks. There's Beth and her interviews, Fabian's efforts to help us market the new novella coming out have changed the way that we engage with the review community, and all of these things are things that when I started GDM, I didn't allow myself to give away and trust other people with doing them, because I was always worried about what if it went wrong. And I think one of the biggest leaps of faith that I took as a very, very small business owner was to start trusting people. And probably the first person I did that with would have been James, who had a chat to me about changing GDM from just a publisher into a content-first website, a bit more like the way Tor.com's model works, where they built up a significant following through their reviews and articles and short stories that they published, and then they set up a short fiction or a novella publisher on the side as a separate wing of their business. When I started trusting people and trusting good humans to do a good job, GDM just exploded.
Love that. And it does. It's essentially your baby, just like whether it's a book to an author or your website or your magazine. And I think it does take a little bit of time to get used to that. I hope these people are just as passionate about what I'm doing as I am. And I think that just comes with over time. But about some novellas, talk about the most recent one.
Oh, so excited for this. So this has been a project that Anna Smith-Spark and Michael R. Fletcher approached me about before the pandemic. We started this project, and
oh wow,
it just got it sort of got put on the back burner a bunch of times to allow for all of our lives to kind of fall apart during COVID times, and to be put back together and to figure out what we were doing and how we were going to progress as businesses, as human beings, as families, and all that sort of stuff. So about mid this year, the final copy for it came in, and it's just bloody magnificent. It's such a fun read. And I remember sitting there doing my final read through just to make sure that I was happy with the way everything went. Basically happy with the way that the story wound up and that it all makes sense. And I hadn't accidentally pasted an extra chapter in there or left something old in there that was meant to be cut. And I remember just sitting there at the end of, I think it only took me about 4 hours, but just sitting there going like, bloody hell, that was a really fun 4 hours. And in that moment, I knew I had something special because, I think when it comes to reading for me, I've never needed to have an incredibly deep philosophical experience or anything like that. I just wanted to enjoy myself. And that's what this book was for me. I was just like, this is just such an enjoyable, fun, out there, brutal, fantasy horror. Like it is a world of fun to read. And so, we had Sarah Chorn do an amazing job finishing the editing that Mike Myers started on that book. Anna and Mike Fletcher were amazing pulling this thing together. It was very difficult on them over the few years of the pandemic, and through all of that, they've created not only their own beautiful, beautiful books, with Anna releasing 2 this year, which were phenomenal reads. Mike finally finishing that trilogy with such a magnificent ending to what Beyond Redemption started back in 2016 or 15, I think. And through all that, they've also managed to pull off this phenomenal novella, which it's starting to hit reviewers' inboxes, and I'm so excited to see what the world thinks of it.
Absolutely. So just as somebody who's read this and wants to give my reviews anywhere and everywhere, I know Amazon's not letting me put any reviews in yet until it's out, correct?
What's that? That's a weird change in Amazon. You can't actually put anything up. So yeah, I usually just put them on Goodreads now and then just go back and chuck them on Amazon. It's a very odd, non-helpful marketing thing that they've done.
Yeah. In fact, I went to do it a couple times, and they're like, well, you can't do it now until it's released. So I was just making sure that I'm going to cross all my X's and O's and all that, and have all the reviews in the right spot. Because, guys, I was lucky enough to read this as an ARC, and it's just like what Adrian said. I've never read anything as wonderfully disturbing. It's so fun. I'll tell you, it took a chapter for me to get used to the kind of character that Anna writes, and it took me a minute to really say, "Oh my gosh, this is brilliant," and just how it really doesn't let you kind of like sneak into this character that she's portraying. You realize it, and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my god, this is great," and this is totally up Anna's alley. So yeah, I'm so excited for people to read it. I think it's something very special, and I think something people are going to be so happy to finally get their hands on, because I see the hype it's creating already. So man, congratulations on being a part of that.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that Anna, Michael, and our publicist Fabienne have done a phenomenal job connecting with the community to help build that up. And I really appreciate you reading and reviewing it. I think our community is going to love it. I think there's a great opportunity for people to read. One of the most, like, Inanra is one of the most out there characters I've ever read. And for perspective to the listeners, it is a demon POV.
Yes.
And it is probably one of the first times, and admittedly, as I said earlier, I'm not tremendously widely read since starting GDM, but it is one of the most amazing demon characters I've ever read. It is not just a human brain in a demon, body, and it is an experience. It's like reading an animal, I suppose. Yeah,
that's a wonderful way to put it, because it is like it's like most of her reading or her writing is similar. Like it's like you get to be her eyes and her mouth and her nose and her ears, and she captures that so well with this demon, like just the chase, and it's just it's an experience, and I'm so excited to hear about more people who've read it. And the title,
In the Shadow of Their Dying.
In the Shadow of Their Dying, which as soon as because I had Anna on shortly before the title came out, and the cover, and she was like, "I'm really excited for this novella that's coming out to me and Mike Fletcher," and I was like, "Oh great, I'm gonna have to wait 2 years for this." And, as soon as she talked about it, it had came out, and that you guys were working on this and getting ready to publish it. Which was a really, really cool thing. And then now that I've read it, even cooler. So, yeah, guys, get ready for an experience. It's wonderful. In the Shadow of Their Dying. So when is that released?
19th of March.
19th of March. So not too much longer, guys. The hype is real. The pre-orders are available on
Amazon primarily. Yep. And then they'll be on... I was about to say Book Depository, but that's gone now, isn't it? So they're basically, they're Amazon for ebook, and then the print book is available in a stack of online retailers aside from Amazon. But Amazon's obviously the key one.
Gotcha. That's going to be wonderful, guys. So a little bit about you. When did you discover that you really like to read, or your love for literature?
As a kid. So I said, Dad was not only a history teacher, he's also an English teacher. So, he taught me to appreciate words and to love reading. And, I spent like so many, stories from authors and stuff. I was that kid rocking up to class, not because I'd been out being a naughty boy, but because I'd been sitting under my covers at 4 a.m. crying when the dog dies in Robinson Crusoe, So like, that I've always loved to read. I've always loved to escape, and to not that I've had a hard life or anything. I've had a great life, but at that moment of forgetting that anything is happening around you, as much as that annoys my poor wife. That moment of forgetting that anything's happening around you, and you look up all of a sudden, you're like, oh no, it's really late and I have work tomorrow. And the older I get, the less capable I am of managing on very little sleep. That is one of the ways that I recharge, who I am as a person, so I can achieve things during the day. So I've loved reading since I can remember being able to read.
I love that. I like to hear those stories because that's what I want to be able to provide for my children. I want to get their imaginations running at a young age, something that I didn't have. I had a great childhood, but reading, for really my fault, I just wasn't. My parents didn't read, and then I just never thought that I would be into it, and I was just very wrong. So I guess if I could go back in time, I would have a story similar to yours. So I'd like to give that to my kids. So I love to hear those stories where you're young and you really get to build this imagination, because I think it's so important to keep a hold of that as an adult. Because you can be having a wonderful day, but just that life's stressful, whether it's a great wonderful life or you're having trials and tribulations or going through trauma, whatever it is. Every now and then it's just nice to have that escapism, and I think that's really important, especially as an adult. So what's next for Grimdark magazine?
We've got a few areas of focus. So our web team, I'm hoping I get to announce this on the 31st. We should, for the first time, hit about 1.5 million views for this year and about 3.9 million website interactions, which is a pretty exciting number. Yeah, we're pretty stoked about it. So I'm hoping to be able to announce that, because I was counting. I'm sitting there going like, I think we're about 10K short. How are we going to make it? So I was chatting to the team this morning about what we can do to find that extra 10K, but I'm sure we'll get there. So the website is something we want to continue to really focus on the growth of. I think we're going to need to look at finding some more reviewers come the new year. I think where people's priorities change and their lives move on, they go off and start their own thing, all that sort of stuff. So we'll probably need to do a drive for that. We have our first short fiction open window in what I think is 2+ years. That'll be opening in March as well. So that's a big thing happening. We're really excited for that. I feel that for a long time we provided the opportunity for authors to get their first publication, their first credit, or to build on what may not be very many credits. And with the introduction of AI and not really knowing how to deal with that, and seeing larger publications like Clark's World really struggling, and I'm sitting here going, geez, it's just something. It's a small business that we run on the side and on top of everyone's already very busy lives. I was sitting there going, geez, how do we handle that? How do I not burn out this team of volunteers to deliver something that I think's pretty important to the writing community? And I think it just got to a point where Beth and I just decided we're going to put our hands up, have a go at it, hope that a short submission window with a long notification means that we get missed by a lot of the people who are just spamming any sort of open window, and therefore hopefully our ratio of actual fiction writers to AI submitters are is a lot more acceptable and manageable.
Sure.
Apart from that, the launch is a pretty big thing. I have a couple of projects that I'm eyeing off at the moment. One potentially for a Kickstarter later in next year for a novel from an author that I feel like the Grimdark community misses with all their collective hearts. And I'm hoping that it is something that works out and we can, come to a mutual agreement that works for both of us and, allows us to both build something really, really cool. And honestly, there's a few, like, I feel like every person that gets on these goes, I've got a bunch of secret projects. So I promise. So we've got like 3 actual secret projects, but I'm quite excited about all 3 of them. It is always just a question of what what can we actually put together in the time that we have available to us next year, and how do we not overcommit, burn ourselves out, or make a financial mistake that sinks the magazine as a business. So those are the things.
That makes me very excited, because I'll tell you, the Kickstarter that you've done before, I really wish I had been in this community. You'd have had somebody who is definitely funding that Kickstarter, which was the anthology, The King Must Fall.
Yeah.
Man, I have that on my Kindle. I haven't read it yet. Well, what I am reading, though, Neon Leviathan. It is very good. I didn't know I was such a fan of short stories. T.R. Napper, man, he is just a wonderful, his prose is wonderful throughout.
Yeah, Tim is amazing. I'm actually so fortunate. So there's a story in there called The Line, and if I remember correctly, it's in one of our first or second year's issues. And Tim at the time was predominantly had written short stories. That he'd won the Writers of the Future contest, the big global one.
Yep.
He'd won a bunch of awards, like Aurealis Awards, which is one of the big Australian fiction awards out here. So if you look at his website, he just has this arm length list of awards because his stories are so damn good. And one of the things that I love about his stories is an ability to pluck at your heartstrings in the way that somebody who has only seen true poverty and true hardship can. I think it's a rare writer who can access those heartstrings when they haven't seen it. Some can, some are just that good. But Tim worked as an aid worker in Southeast Asia, in Mongolia, and if you've ever traveled Southeast Asia, even as soon as you get off the tourist strip of whatever city you're in, it helps you appreciate how fortunate that by some stroke of sheer luck, or if you believe in God's a divine intervention or whatever it is, you were born in a first world country where on your worst day, it is probably going to be a whole lot better than the best day that a large portion of the population of those countries gets to have, in regards to safety, in regards to food accessibility, in regards to your ability to, trip and break your leg and know that a truck will come pick you up and cart you off to a hospital. And in that hospital, they will probably look after you and not make a mistake or something horrible. There is such a level of security for the greater majority of the population of Australia, of the US, of the UK, that the greater majority of the populations get nowhere near being able to enjoy throughout those Southeast Asian countries. And Tim, as an aid worker, worked in the hardest parts of those countries. And and when you take that angle and he's worked it into his short stories, you can see where he's taken his life experiences and he's put them into that fiction, and he's played out the potential future of humanity as he sees it if we continue going down the paths of major, conglomerations, governments seemingly getting worse and worse, and societies becoming more and more divested from each other. And it just hit all the right spots for me. And then about 2 years later, he hit me up and said, "Hey, I actually have a stack of short stories. Would you ever consider doing a collection?" And at the time, I think I was working on Evil as a Matter of Perspective, because I'd been made redundant from my job and I was taking a few months off work. So I was sitting there in a library, and then he pitched this idea to me. I was like, that's a fantastic idea. Let's see what happens. Just went through the realities of working with a small publisher like myself who hadn't done something like that before. And we just both got on the same page, agreed to have a go of it. And when we published that, we had a few chats with people in the local industry, and they said that a single author collection by an Australian author, if you could sell 500 copies, you'd be doing well. And I think at last count, that book has sold upwards of 2,200 copies.
Wow. So I think now that I know, because I did not know that about Tim, that's going for the rest of what I have to read is going to be part of my. I talk a lot about it on this channel where I have this experience where I get to talk to authors as I'm reading their book or right before. Usually, I talk to some authors after I've read their work. Incredible experience, of course, but I find that after learning some inspirations or parts of their personality or their life, such as what you just like, that's huge what you just said about what he's done with his life. That's just going to help me have such a more authentic experience reading his work. So thank you for sharing that, and that's wonderful. I hope to talk with him on the channel one day because I think he'd be wonderful conversation.
He's an excellent interview. So I'm very lucky to know him on a personal level as well. And probably maybe once or twice a year, we get to hang out and have a good chin wag. And he is an incredibly fascinating human. I'm happy to give you his email address for an introduction. I highly recommend having a chat with him. He's a great bloke.
Well, once we're done with the live portion of this, I will absolutely grab that from you because any friend of Grimdark Magazine has a friend on my channel. So who are a couple people? Well, obviously, we just talked to one, so you can't say him. A couple people who I should chat with in the future.
I'm going to go a bit out of left field here. I feel that some really fascinating conversations about publishing happen with authors, but I personally have always really enjoyed getting to know the business side of publishing. So I really love. I was on a panel at a recent thing in Canberra in Australia called Conflux, which is the premier science fiction and fantasy premier science fiction convention in Australia. And I was on a panel with Ellen Datlow, who I've been fortunate enough to meet a couple of times now. And she is probably the world's premier anthologist. She's magnificent. She's also an editor for Tor.com. Having any time getting to chat with Ellen is just phenomenal. If you can't tell, I am a bit, starstruck whenever I get to, chat to her. She's a phenomenal human. And just so knowledgeable, and the way that she talks about her industry and what she does is, to me, so cool. Another person I would suggest would be Sean Speakman. So, not only does he run Grim Oak Press, he also runs a small charity called Grim Oak Shield, and he's also an author of the Anwin cycle of some novellas of which we've published in our anthologies. And he's also just turned The King Killing Queen, which was originally published as a novella in The King Must Fall. He's just turned that into a full-blown novel. I think it's also getting the graphic novel treatment from Skybound Entertainment. So that's turning into something really, really cool and really big. And I think that novel's going to go off like a frog in a sock. It's pretty excited for him. So if you can chat to him, you'll get the best of all worlds with that one. And then finally, and I would love to do this, mate, have a chat with Matthew from The Broken Binding, from the perspective of the ability to upscale a business from very, very small to incredibly large so quickly. His focus on brand and branding and creating those Instagrammable moments that have helped his products go viral. His ability to, bring out self-published authors like Ryan Cahill and just turn what was, again, I haven't read it, sorry, Ryan, turn what was reportedly a very good book into into a phenomenon though, right? So I look at that and go, it takes a very special business brain to be able to achieve something like that. So I think those three conversations would be three very fascinating conversations.
So Ellen, what was Ellen's last name?
Datlow, Datlow.
Thank you. Sean Speakman is going to be on January 10th. I'm so excited to talk with him. I don't remember who it was. Oh, his name is A.D. Landor. He is an indie author. And he said, that'd be good So I reached out to him. He's been so nice, and I can't wait to have him on. I think that's a wonderful conversation ahead of me and Matthew from Broken Binding. I think I write them probably twice a month. Hey, how far away until I'm on the sub list, right? Because when I first signed up, it was like I was number 7,000 and some odd people, right? And I think you're so right. He has done and a wonderful job. I think the last time Ryan had, I think they were doing like some of the damaged copies of Blood and Fire, and sold out in like 10 seconds, something stupid. And it takes some, and he does all of this beautifully, as quality, and it's affordable.
And I think a lot of that comes down to like his economy of scale. And when I have I've had a couple of phone conversations with him over this year, and one of the things that he really focused on, and I may be misquoting him because this particular conversation happened at the start of this year or the end of last year, but he was saying he's from a background where he couldn't afford all the really cool books and all that sort of stuff, and so his goal was to make them affordable, was to hit the level of scale and to hit a profit margin that was fair, aligned with the scale of what he was producing, that would enable him and his team to have a living. Because you can remember, he has employees.
Yeah.
He's found the way to actually scale his business, to look after himself, to look after his employees. And at the same time, he's been able to provide products that, as you say, they are beautiful. And, when you look at the products being built, even back when I scoped out the King Must Fall and what we could and couldn't do to a book, that was only a few years back. And the stuff he's doing now is just stunning, absolutely stunning. Like his books have actually converted me from someone who swore that I would go to my deathbed without producing something with sprayed edges to somebody sitting there with a little folder of pictures I've taken going like, oh, look at all those sprayed edges. They're the coolest thing ever. So it's, I got a lot of time for him and Sean and Ellen. They are, and the reason I say that they're worth a chat, I think it's, so rarely do you get really good insights into the actual publishing industry. You can get plenty of insights into authors and, sometimes editors, but it is quite difficult, I find, to get good business discussions happening around what it is that has made them successful, or what drove them to make certain decisions that maybe didn't go so well or did go really, really well. And I'm not sure, maybe most of the fantasy community just thinks that's something they don't care about, but to me, I find that to be just such a fascinating aspect of the industry.
It is. And you're through these, that's why I asked this question: who are a few people you'd like to see me chat with? I ask this to everybody now, and that's the reason, because when I started, I thought I was going to be doing a couple reviews here and there. Really, it's become this pursuit of knowledge, and well, for me, and then especially for everybody else that are watching, I want people to learn something when they come to my channel, and I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, you have to publish a book and know the ins and out of that to know whether you're doing it right or for the right price. And I think those sorts of people will be wonderful in my to aid in that journey for knowledge. So thank you for that. I would just like to also thank you for letting me borrow you. I know you're a very busy guy. So to spend an hour with me on my channel really means a lot to me, Adrian. So I just really appreciate it.
No, Matt, I thank you so much for having me on to chat to you and your followers. It's actually quite a nice break from my day job to chat fantasy and sci-fi with you, mate. So thank you so much for giving me your time.
Oh man, of course. And for anybody in the live section that you guys got to catch this wonderful chat live, thank you so much. And for those who will watch in the future, thank you so much. Tomorrow I will be chatting with Rebecca Cuthbert. She is actually my very first author that does poetry on the channel, and that'll be a fun conversation. She does kind of like a horror themed poetry, and it's poetry for those who don't like poetry. And I said, what does that mean? And then I read her book, and I get it now. So that'll be tomorrow at 9 p.m. Of course, the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe. That always helps us out. And so the next one, I appreciate you guys again, and we will see you next time.